Oded is one of our most prolific entrepreneurs. The number of companies that he has generated is reaching double-digit numbers. So can we have Oded Shoseyov here, please? Oded.
So 3 billion years of evolution resulted in some remarkable materials and structures that we wish we had in our possession. Take, for example, sequoia trees. I like this example because these trees carry hundreds of tons for hundreds of years in cold weather, hot conditions, UV light. And yet, if you look at the structure and ask yourself how this tree is making that, so if you look by high-resolution electron microscopy, what you find out, surprisingly, that this thing is made of sugar. Well, not exactly the same as we drink in our tea, but actually it's a homopolymer of glucose called cellulose. Now, even that is not accurate. In fact, these polymers are organized as a nanofiber, which is about 100 nanometer in length and about 5 to 10 nanometer in width. And at the end of the day, this material is about 10 times stronger than steel, which is amazing. And it's a sugar. So, analysts all over the world believe that this nanofiber called nanocellulose is going to be one of the most important materials for the entire industry. And I'm talking about transportation, medicine, sports, air and space, everything. But here's the problem. Say you wanted to buy half a ton of nanocellulose to make a boat or an airplane. You could Google, you could eBay, you could even Alibaba. Couldn't find it. So we at the Hebrew University, about 6 years ago, together with our partners in Europe, mainly in Sweden, Italy, and Germany, we decided to focus on a technology that will enable us to produce on a cost-effective manner at industrial scale nanocellulose. So the first thing we were looking for is a raw material. Of course, we didn't want to cut sequoia trees, and there is no reason to do that. And the reason is because nanocellulose or cellulose is everywhere. So we were sourcing for a good raw material and we found one. We found the sludge of the paper industry. Now, one good reason why it's a good source is because it's everywhere. In fact, there is so much of that, it covers our continents. Europe alone produces anywhere between 11 to 12 million tons of that material, and the same here in the US. This is the equivalent of a mountain 3 kilometers high that we build from that sludge every year. So for everybody, it's an environmental problem. For us, it's a source of nanocellulose, which is a great material. So a company was established based on the technology that was licensed from the Hebrew University, Melodea, together with partners in Europe, in Sweden, Holman. It's a very large forestry and pulp and paper company. And now we have the ability to produce on a large scale nanocellulose. So what can you do with that? Well, nanocellulose, in fact, is suspended in water. Now, if you look at that material, you see nothing. It's transparent because it's a nano size. But once you take the material and you put it on any substrate, and once the water evaporates, the fibers, the nanofibers, self-assemble into an extremely strong film, which is transparent. Now, just to give you a feel how strong it is about twice as strong as epoxy resin. And remember, there is no covalent bond here. It's only hydrogen bonding, van der Waals interactions. It's simply the fact these nanofibers self-assemble, come close together in a well-organized manner. So, the other application that can be done is for 3D printing. So we can use this material to 3D print lots of interesting materials. And more recently, we showcased nanocellulose in the Biennale for Architecture in Venice, where we've made a very nice shelter that is all made of nanocellulose. Many other applications can be realized with these materials, anywhere from paint reinforcement, for barrier films, for food and packaging, construction, and many other applications you can see. Now, we already have a pilot plant operating in Israel, in the northern part of Israel. And more recently, we have now another industrial site in Sweden with a capacity of 60 tons per annum to start and supply the demand. Well, nature didn't stop its wonders in the plant kingdom. You look at this creature, which is the cat flea. I think it's an amazing creature. And why? Because it has the ability to jump as high as almost 200 times its height. And that's amazing because it's the equivalent of a person standing in the middle of Manhattan and in a single jump go to the top of the Empire State Building. So I'm sure many of us would like to have this ability, but the real question is how cat fleas do it. So it turns out that cat fleas developed this wonderful nanomaterial which is called Rezulin. Rezulin is a protein, but in simple words, it's the best rubber on earth. In fact, you can stretch it, you can squish it, and it doesn't lose any energy or almost any energy to the environment by friction or heat. And once you release it, snap, it brings back all the energy. So that's exactly how cat fleas use that to make their jumping pad. So everybody would like to have Rezulin, right? But the problem is that to catch cat fleas is difficult because they are jumpy. But you don't really have to. And the reason is, all you have to do is catch only one. And now you can extract the DNA and clone the gene that is responsible for making this Rezulin and clone it into a less jumpy organism, which is a plant. So that's exactly what we did. So now we have the ability to produce a lot of Rezulin, both in bacteria and in plants. So what can you do with that? A lot of things. I won't dwell on all of the applications, but we are now working with On. On is a Swiss company that actually would like to develop the next generation sports shoes for athletes that would like to have better performance. And I hope that by now I convinced you that nanobiomaterials coming from nature are much better than synthetics. Well, some of our friends who are orthopedic surgeons are still not convinced, and they continue to implant in our body synthetic implants, which they glue and they screw into our body. And I don't think that it's a great idea for a simple reason. Why? Because in nature, things are done differently. In nature, there is no one that takes my head and screw it into my neck, or take my skin and glue it onto my body, right? In nature, everything is self-assembled. Every living cell, whether it comes from a fish or an insect or a human being, contains a DNA, and the DNA encodes for these nanobio building blocks. Many times they are proteins, other times they are enzymes. They make other materials like fatty acids, polysaccharides. But a common feature of all these nanomaterials is that they need no one. They recognize each other and self-assemble into structures and scaffolds on which cells are proliferating and developing into tissues that are organized into organs, and altogether brings life. So we at Hebrew University decided to focus on one of the most important nanobiomaterials for us human beings, which is collagen. Now, why collagen? Because it accounts for about 30% of our dry weight. I'll give you a few examples. Bone, 50% collagen, 50% minerals. Skin, 70% collagen. Tendons and ligaments, close to 100% collagen. So I always like to say that anyone who is in the business of replacing parts for a human being would like to have collagen. But admittedly, 12 years ago, before we even started our project, there were already on the market more than 1,000 medical implants made of collagen. You know, simple things like dermal fillers to reduce wrinkles, augment lips. More sophisticated structures and implants like artificial meniscus, bone grafts, even leaflets of heart valves. So what's new? Who needs us? Well, the problem is that the source of all that collagen is dead bodies. In fact, dead pigs, dead cows, and even human cadaver. And of course, it's a source of human pathogens. And not talking about the quality, because this is collagen extracted from old, used tissue. So in fact, the FDA already in 2007 made a notice asking the companies that work with that to start and look for better alternatives. So that's exactly what we did. We cloned all the 5 human genes from human that are responsible for making type 1 collagen, and by genetic engineering, introduced all the 5 human genes into a single tobacco plant. So now, the plant has the ability to make brand new collagen, human collagen. And today in Israel, we are growing 25,000 square meters of greenhouses all over the country, from the Golan Heights, Upper Galilee, in the middle of the country, in the Arava, and more recently in Kalia, in Jordan Valley, where the farmers receive these small plants from CollPlant. That's a company that was established based on this technology. These small plants look exactly like regular tobacco plants, except that they contain 5 human genes that are responsible for making type 1 collagen. They grow them for anywhere between 50 to 60 days, harvest the leaves, and the leaves are transported by cooling trucks to the factory in the north, where the process starts. Now, in fact, if you have ever made pesto, essentially the same process. You crush the leaves, get the juice, concentrate the protein is then purified by clean rooms, from which we get 100% pure human collagen, untouched, no pathogens. And from that collagen, now we're making different medical implants. Now, I'm not talking about science fiction. We are today producing already replacement parts for human beings in plants. The first product that already reached the market in Europe, completed clinical trial, is a flowable gel device, which is indicated for diabetic foot ulcer, pressure ulcers, venous ulcers, and surgical wounds. The results are quite amazing. People are very happy with that. In fact, we just recently received a very nice testimony from one of the leading key opinion leaders in Europe saying how great this material. In a single application of their material, a total cure. Another product which, again, completed clinical trials in Israel is a product which is indicated for tendonitis. This is an injectable collagen to the tendon. Again, that particular product already reached the market in Europe. More recently, we signed an agreement with Arthrex. Arthrex is one of the leading sports medicine companies in the world. And now the product is started being distributed in Europe, and hopefully in the future also here in the US. Now remember the Rezulin that I spoke before. We asked ourselves a question: what will happen if we will add a little bit of Rezulin to collagen fibers that we can make? So the first question is, are the cells going to like it? The answer is yes. In fact, they don't mind about little amount of Rezulin. What about the mechanical properties? Great news. The fibers are much stronger, increased by 380% in toughness and 300% in strain. So oddly enough, in the future, when we will make artificial tendons and ligaments from that material, the patient will have better performance after the surgery than he had before the injury. So what's for the future? I personally believe that in the future we'll be able to produce many more bio-building blocks that nature provided to us, like collagen, nanocellulose, Rezulin, and many others. Produce them in plants, extract them, and use modern technologies like 3D printing, for example, to produce, for example, a heart. Now, this heart is not going to be the same as we can get from a donor. It will be better. It will perform longer and will be stronger. Another company that was established recently is Biobetter. Biobetter is a company based on technology that came from the Hebrew University, where the goal of that company is to make biological drugs affordable. Now, biological drugs are great drugs. In fact, they are very effective with very few side effects, but there is one big problem. They cost a lot. Just to give you a feel, Humira, which is a more than $50 billion drug annually, the cost per patient on the average is $35,000 US per year. That's almost $100 a day. It translates to the fact that only 1 out of 1,000 people in the world can afford it, which could have a cure with that drug. So we asked ourselves, where is the problem? Well, the biggest problem in biological drugs is the cost of production. Of course, there are always the regulation, clinical trials, which are very expensive, but a major cost is the cost of production, because you need to ferment these mammalian cells in very expensive vessels, clean rooms, utilities, and so on. And also the downstream purification, which is also very expensive. So what we have done, we cloned the genes that are responsible for making this Humira, the heavy chain and light chain antibodies, into a plant together with some other purification tools. So we moved almost the entire factory into the plant that can now be grown in a greenhouse. And by doing that, we've been able to cut by 2 orders of magnitude the cost of production. Now that is translated to less than $1 a day per patient, with still more than 90% profit margin for the producer. And hopefully that will be the next a revolution of biological drugs in the world. And I would like to quote Professor Roger Kornberg, who said, "A day will come in the future when people will look back and ask, why did anyone ever bother with animalic expression system when plants are favorable in every aspect?" And I believe you can ask Roger if he said that in lunch break. Well, another big thing in the world is medical cannabis. And it's also a big thing at the Hebrew University. But there is, and indeed, it's a huge opportunity for mankind. But there are still a lot of challenges. And one of the biggest challenges of this medical cannabis business is consistency. You can pick flowers from the same plant, and it will have different cannabinoid composition, which is a big problem for the patient, but in addition also to the doctor that prescribed the medicine. So we at the Hebrew University decided to combine chemistry, physics, and artificial intelligence to develop a new technology that enable us in few seconds to determine by remote sensing, without touching the flower, the exact cannabinoid composition. And by doing that, we'll be able to provide much more consistent and standardized cannabis for the patients. The technology was realized, and in fact, the company Cannabi-Tech aimed to launch a beta site, both in Israel, US, and Canada by the end of this year with that technology. And I would like to wrap my talk by quoting a good friend of mine that once told me, if you want a new idea, you should open an old book. And I'm going to say that the book was written. In fact, the book was written over 3 billion years of evolution. And the text is the DNA of life. All we have to do is read that text and start our progress from there and embrace nature's gift to us. Thank you.